You've probably heard all kinds of strategies about what to do when your Amazon PPC ACoS is too high. But the truth is, there's only two ways to lower your ACoS.
We're making it super easy to troubleshoot ACoS and fix your problems on that Amazon Ads podcast. All right, Andrew, there was a survey that was done on LinkedIn that was asking Amazon advertisers what was their biggest problem when it came to Amazon. I think it was including, not just Amazon PPC, but also just everything, the whole Amazon business. And it was saying, is it high ACoS and struggle, managing that ACoS, or is it sales, trying to grow the sales, or was it other? And overwhelmingly, 2/3 of respondents said trying to manage that ACoS is the biggest problem, the biggest pain point they have. And then around 20% said sales, and then the rest went to other. So huge problem. And for you and me, Andrew, how often do you run into ACoS problems on the accounts that you're managing? How often is that a pain point that you're struggling to do?
Hitting the overall targets and everything, not usually a problem that I run into personally, but I'm not surprised to hear that so many people do have that issue with it, with managing PPC, because there's a lot of people out there that talk and share their strategies. They always say, like, oh, you want to lower your ACoS? Just use this ad type, or just use this campaign match type, or whatever. There's a lot of information out there that just leads people astray, doesn't actually solve the true problem of what it actually takes to manage to an ACoS goal. So not surprised there, but not typically something I'm running into on a regular basis. How about you?
Yeah, I think for neither of us has ACoS ever been a problem, trying to hit the target ACoS and really maintain sales volume within that target ACoS, assuming that the target's, reasonable, like 30% or whatever, not a 1% target. But for the most part, we've always been able to maintain sales volume within that target ACoS when it's time to reduce ACoS, to pull it down quickly and efficiently. And so not an issue for us, not to like pat ourselves on the shoulders or anything. We just have some strategies that we think will help you guys. So for everyone else where that is a major pain point, continue listening to the rest of this episode, the full thing, because everything that we're gonna say is gonna be very important. But before you do continue in this episode, if you haven't already, make sure you watch episode 34, which is titled "Why Revenue Per Click, Why RPC is King," because a lot of what we're talking about here is going to depend on assuming that you already have that knowledge.
Yeah, episode 34 is such a foundational episode because it really breaks down what ACoS really even is. And it's really just a relationship between your spend and your sales, and how we can control and manipulate and manage that relationship between those two metrics is what we're going to be digging into today, and explaining how we control that in a pay-per-click platform like Amazon. So whenever we're looking at how to manage ACoS, we're looking at the relationship between spend and sales. But within Amazon, we're looking at that on a click-by-click basis. So we're looking at the relationship between CPC, or the spend, how we're actually attributing spend to our campaigns, versus the sales, or the revenue per click, which is very well laid out in that episode. But yeah, we can dig into it. Those are the two. There's only really two levers that we have control over within Amazon. We can control spend, or CPCs, or we can increase sales, or the conversion rates, or the revenue per click. Those are really the two main categories that we actually have any ways to control. So let's dig into discussing how we can control some of those levers within the spend side of the equation.
So it might sound a little too common sense. We're saying you either have to reduce the spend or increase the sales to affect the ACoS, but unfortunately, a lot of people need that reminder, or at least need help figuring out how to effectively lower that spend. So as Andrew said, we're really looking at this at a click-by-click basis. Reducing the CPC is going to be the easiest way to lower your ACoS, to reduce that spend. But how you can do that effectively is going to be from a few different ways. And a lot of this, you're going to have to really dive into the weeds and look at. So everything that we're saying here, you're going to have to look at this at a campaign by campaign basis, and then also at a campaign placement basis, and also at a keyword basis. But what you want to do is just basically find what are the items, what are the entities that have the highest amount of spend or the highest amount of clicks, and then look at how those ones, what the CPCs are on those relative to your average, relative to everything else, to try to find what are the ones that are actually driving that overall CPC. Because just to put it into perspective, if you have one keyword with one click and a 50-cent CPC, and another keyword with 1,000 clicks and a $1 CPC, your average CPC is basically going to be $1 because that one click of 50 cents isn't having that much of an impact. So you're looking at where the overall volume is going. So what's the items that are having the most spend, the most clicks? Those are going to be the ones that are impacting your overall CPC most heavily. And for those items, you've got to really dive in to find out, what's the ACoS on those. It's probably high if your overall account ACoS is high, and then it's very likely that where the most of your spend is going, that ACoS is high. But you have to try to optimize those bids, reduce those CPCs. That's where that episode on why revenue per click is king is really valuable for trying to figure out what those CPCs should be. But most of the time, you're going to find that not all keywords are performing at the same conversion. It could be that a lot of that traffic, a lot of that spend is going towards upper funnel keywords, less relevant keywords, or perhaps just a lot of broad and auto type match type campaigns, which is just negatively impacting your overall conversion rates. We're going to come back to those conversion rates in a second. But we also see those placements, those campaign placements are generally going to have a lot of wasted spend on top of search and rest of search. Not even wasted spend, just a lot of spend in general that is having a high CPC with a low conversion rate or a low revenue per click. So just pulling back those bids on those worst performing keywords, worst performing placements, and also those search terms potentially as well.
Yeah, very well said. You really have to take that top-down approach look. You have to be considering all the placements, all the keyword bids, and how that all functions in tandem, and ultimately try to pull down those CPCs to reduce the spend, improve ACoS. So, a couple caveats and things to mention about that. Like, just because you bring down your CPCs doesn't necessarily always mean that you're going to bring down the ACoS. You could potentially lose a lot of the sales that are coming from certain keywords if you reduce the bids, reduce the CPCs too low. There is an auction system within Amazon where the highest bidder gets the placement. There is a certain point, there's a threshold where you will stop getting impressions and stop getting visibility on specific keywords if your bids drop too low. So there is a word of warning there to, be cautious with those reductions. You could potentially pull yourself out of auctions altogether, completely lose the sales that were happening on a keyword. So this is something to be taken with caution, and make sure you're not, pulling yourself out of that suggested bid range too aggressively.
Yeah, so we're going to jump into conversion rates in just a second, but I've got one more thing to add to this CPC conversation because the biggest mistake I see people make when they're trying to lower ACoS is they sort by campaigns with the highest ACoS. And so let's just say your target ACoS is 30%, the account's currently at 40%, and you're thinking, man, I got to do something about this. So you sort by highest ACoS and you find you've got campaigns that are running at 100%, 50%, 80%, etc. So let's just say you've got like 5 campaigns there, right? Averaging, 90% ACoS if you take those 5 in total. And you're like, I'm going to reduce the bids on these campaigns. So you go in, reduce the bids. You come back next week, your ACoS is still at 40%. Maybe those campaigns are down now to 30%. Maybe you effectively did them. And it's like, why is my ACoS still at 40%? It could be because you have a lot more higher spending campaigns that are averaging 40% ACoS. So to only go for the super high ACoS ones, they might have had no volume. So you could have something with 200% ACoS because it spent $20 to get a $10 sale. And that seems alarming. Oh, 200% ACoS. But it's like, yeah, it was $20 of spend. Your account spends $20,000 a month. And here's a campaign that is absorbing half of that spend out of 40% ACoS. That is going to be much more detrimental to the business. That big spending campaign that's just a little bit over the target ACoS, as opposed to smaller campaigns that have like ridiculous high ACoS. So that's where we're saying filter down to the ones with the campaigns or the keywords, et cetera, with the highest spend or the highest sales. And let's say you're trying to troubleshoot one product in particular. Just say it's one product where like the ACoS or the tacos is really high, and you're just trying to pull that down. A lot of times, if you go into filter down for just the campaigns that are advertising that product, and then you filter down to just the keywords, a lot of times you're going to find all that spend, like it could be 30, 40% of all that spend is just going to one keyword or one like auto campaign that's just averaging too high. And you can reduce that bid to effective. It's just one bid adjustment, on one target that was spending a lot, that was a little bit above that target, is going to be much more effective as opposed to trying to reduce the spend everywhere. So that's going to be absolutely critical. And then from there, if it is like a match type problem, like it's an auto campaign, and you're afraid that if I reduce those bids, I'm going to just lose a lot of that volume. There's still a ton of sales volume behind that. I don't want to lose it. Well, that's where increasing that conversion rate comes through. And we're going to dive into that topic next. One final thing I forgot to say on the last one was how to effectively lower that that cost per click. Check out the episode on death by 1,000 cuts. We're not going to rehash that whole thing now, but that's a lot of the times can be an issue where you do have thousands of keywords that are just one click here, one click there, not a big issue, but cumulatively they might be averaging too high of a CPC. You can reduce the bids on those. So I just forgot to mention that. But Andrew, what can you tell us about increasing that revenue per click or that conversion rate?
Yeah. So we talked about the reducing spend side of things. How do we actually improve the conversion rates, the revenue per click? How do we increase the sales side of the equation here? So there's a handful of things that you can do to improve the conversion rates of your campaigns. You can go through and get rid of all the stuff that's either low converting or non-converting. You can do that through negating keywords, negating search terms that are not converting at all. That's going to cut down the wasted spend without actually reducing any sort of sales contribution. If it's not converting, it's not driving any sort of sales, so you can effectively reduce those the cost from those keywords. Or you could shift more of your spend towards placements where things actually convert best. So as Stephen was talking about in reducing your CPCs, a lot of times we're trying to effectively reduce the CPCs on specific placements that don't convert as well. In the inverse side of that, we want to shift more of our spend where we convert better, where those ad dollars can stretch further and actually drive more efficient conversions there. So kind of the inverse of pulling away from the bad placements that aren't converting as well, shifting more of that budget on placements that are converting well, and a little bit of a reallocation of spend towards things that are converting for you.
Yeah, and there's really a lot more that needs to be said here. We're trying to keep this video kind of short, but as you know, we do have the masterclass. The link is in the description below. The episode talking about how to effectively manage ACoS and grow sales simultaneously. Those are two different lessons combined. There, it's probably like an hour of content that really dives into the weeds. One of the things I'm just going to mention very briefly on that lesson around ACoS, and if we get enough comments asking for it, we can just upload it to YouTube for free. So leave a comment if you would like that, and we'll do that for you. But to troubleshoot the change in ACoS over time, we should have opened the episode with this. But let's just say your ACoS increased by 10 percentage points, month over month. So it went from 30% to 40%. To identify where that change in ACoS came from, you have to look at what was the change in cost per click month over month and what was the change in revenue per click month over month. If your cost per click stayed flat and your revenue per click reduced by 10% month over month, now you know where that ACoS came from, because ACoS will always just be that same ratio of cost per click to revenue per click. So what we're trying to do here is figure out what changed. Now, if cost per click went up by 10% and revenue per click stayed flat, then you know to start troubleshooting where did those CPC changes come from, and you're going to go back to that first step, which is looking for the items with the most amount of clicks, etc., that are averaging higher CPCs, and try to see what changed there on those ones, what kind of bid changes, what type of placement changes, harvesting, whatever. When it comes to the revenue per click side of the equation, if you're seeing that RPC decreased by a larger amount than that the CPC increased, if one went up by 10%, CPC went up by 10%, RPC came down by 10%, then your ACoS would have gone up by 20%, and you'd have both of those to look at. But if the CPC stayed flat, or maybe your CPCs like only went up 1%, but the revenue per click dropped by 10 or 20%, you know that you have a much bigger problem on that conversion rate side of things that you're gonna have to troubleshoot. So it's very important to see which of these two metrics, CPC, RPC, which one changed by a larger amount, and that's gonna be where you need to start troubleshooting. So if you are seeing that the revenue per click is declining, then you're definitely gonna wanna look at a few things. Where the first thing is, where is that traffic coming from? Where did that traffic change? Because it's very possible that you got more clicks from lower converting keywords if you did a round of harvesting or a round of campaign launches or adding new keywords, adding a bunch of auto broad campaigns. You might have just gotten a lot more clicks from items with lower conversion rates, which is pulling down the total average conversion rate for your account. So you're going to do that same process when you're trying to see where did that conversion rate decrease come from. You can do this one of two ways. You can either look at number one, what were the items with just the most clicks that are averaging a below average conversion rate? So if your average conversion rate is, let's say, 10%, then You can use either, you can use the ad console, you could use ad labs, whatever, but you're going to filter out for everything that has a high number of clicks or even sort it by highest clicks, but averaging below 10% conversion rate. And that's going to allow you to find all those things that are below average that, because of the sheer amount of clicks that they're getting, is more heavily impacting your overall performance. The second thing you could do is, and we probably should have done some screenshots. We'll throw up a screenshot here that I'll go grab later because I don't have one ready. But you can also try to find what are the items that had the biggest change in sales. So it's possible that something previously was a high converting keyword that was driving a lot of volume, and going month over month, all of a sudden that total sales volume has decreased and maybe the clicks have dropped too. So if you're only sorting by highest clicks, you might miss some of the stuff where just the total click traffic dropped off. So you can also try to sort by the largest change in sales to try to find where did that drop off in sales come from things that might have been previously doing better, but now are not doing as good.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a simplistic way to really start to diagnose and understand what the root cause of the change in performance actually was. Being able to see your CPC, RPC, and quickly know which side of the equation you actually need to drill into and start troubleshooting is really step one to diagnosing, figuring out what you need to do and what actions you need to take to start troubleshooting what's going on in the account. I also think you could have a shifting of the keywords that are actually spending, and that could be the change in performance, could be the driver of it, or there's other market factors that play a role in the overall conversion rate of a listing. You could work on try and improve the overall reviews and listing quality, imagery, all that type of stuff to improve the conversion rate of a product. But that's much harder and takes a lot longer to actually do. It's not something that's gonna, you're gonna change one image and then overnight you're gonna see a big change in conversion rate. It's gonna be slow, steady over time. You'll see change in momentum. But whenever it comes to broader market implications, a competitor runs a deal, for example, that could drop your conversion rate for a period of time. If they're running a 7-day deal, they're going to capture more of the sales volume, sales velocity, click traffic, all that type of stuff. So there's other things that you could look at too to help kind of identify, pinpoint, and see what the change could have been caused by. That's not necessarily just within your ad console. There's other factors that could contribute to that as well that you should pay attention to and at least be aware of.
All right, everyone, I apologize. We ended up not doing a screenshot, and I just decided to jump into a screen share instead because I just thought that would be very helpful. Honestly, we should have been doing this the whole time. So, my sincere apologies. But here's an account where we are looking at 4 weeks of September compared to the previous 4 week. Maybe we'll just do the first 4 months of August. So it's fully 1 to 28, 1 to 28. And here we see that the ACoS is up 20%. Now, you could just say, well, where did that come from? Did that come from either a spend increase or a sales decrease? But better than that is to look at the cost per click and the revenue per click. So we saw that the revenue per click came down a tiny bit, 1.6%, but the cost per click went up 20%. So hopefully you're seeing now, like when this ACoS increased, it's going to be either one of those things. Either your conversion rates dropped, and then you're going to troubleshoot that, like Andrew was saying, looking at, is there seasonality going on? Is there an issue with your listing going on? Maybe your competitors were running in deals. Like, you can troubleshoot a lot more things like that, or be troubleshooting the types of traffic that you're driving. Maybe it was more upper funnel traffic, etc. If it's a cost per click issue, then you just know that you're getting a lot more volume behind some higher CPC keywords. It could be that, previously you had some really competitive ranking campaign that you just increased the budget on. Maybe before it was running out of budget every day at like 10 a.m. And since you increased the budget, now it's getting overall a lot more clicks, a lot more traffic. And, that could be driving the CPCs up, or you just increase the bids, any of those factors. But in this case, we're seeing that CPC is up. And so now we can start coming through here and troubleshooting. So again, if I just sort by highest ACoS, these items here, like, you don't want to be just looking at stuff that's 140% ACoS, because that's not ultimately impacting the account as heavily as the stuff with the most clicks, or even better yet, we're really trying to see that change in spend, right? So we can change this to sort by which ones had the biggest increase in spend to really try to figure out what's causing this ACoS to go up. And so for this account, I just happen to know we were intentionally raising our target ACoS up to around like 25 to 30% range just to try to be more aggressive and grow some sales. But you can now start seeing here, like, what are the items that are really high ACoS that have also had the biggest increase in that spend. Now, this was a campaign that was previously just not running, so it ran from zero, and up, and then that's going to be $1 or $2 CPC. That's the other thing you're trying to find here, right? The average CPC went from 65 cents to 78 cents. So, what are the items that are averaging above that CPC? Because that's pulling up the total CPC. So, it's pretty easy to see here. These are all the items with those higher CPCs. And then if we really want to jump into these campaigns, how many campaigns is this we have here? Well, let's just try to find like the top 20-ish% of spend. So 18,000, what's 20% of that? 18. Just trying to get to 3.6. So down here I can see the sum. We're trying to find the first 3.6K of spend. So it's really just those first two campaigns. We could go up a little bit larger. Actually, let's just go up the first half. Okay, so around here, these first 8 campaigns are driving half of the spend. How many campaigns do we have in total? 170 campaigns that are active. So you can see you don't need to necessarily optimize everything. You just need to take the top, 7, 8, 9, 10 campaigns. A lot of times they're driving, 50% of that spend and revenue. And then we're just going to do go to targeting. And now we can drill down to just these select campaigns and see more specifically just on these campaigns, where's the spend going? Hopefully, this is starting to make sense where you can look into what are the items that have had you can see for this whole section. A lot of these campaigns were just campaigns that, like I said, were not previously running, but now we've been able to troubleshoot. You see that the spend and ACoS, everything is largely coming from these items. They're averaging 40% ACoS, a lower conversion rate than which is average for this account. And overall, that CPC is significantly higher. So, in this case, this is not the best period over period, but in this case, you can see that the ACoS has come down slightly. And you could look at, the revenue per click has come down, but the cost per click has come down by even more. So if you're trying to do the inverse and be like, why did that ACoS decrease? You're going to say, well, either the revenue per click increased or the CPC decreased. In this case, they both decreased. So, but the cost per click came down even more. So we know that this is the major reason for why that ACoS has come down. And so from here, you can further troubleshoot. You can look at different placements, look at the search terms within here. And I hope this makes a lot more sense. And if it's not, then leave some questions below.
Yeah, that's such a powerful methodology for sifting through an account and really being able to pinpoint and identify what's driving the change in the account. What do you need to do to troubleshoot it and move it in the direction that you want? Really like the way you laid that out, kind of looking at the highest spenders, what's going to, if you adjust something, what's going to actually move the needle on the account as a whole, and trying to favor those adjustments towards what's actually going to make the impact that you're looking for. So really well said. I don't have a whole lot else to add. Anything else from your end before we wrap it up?
Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, do all the things that keep this channel alive. And we'll see you guys next time on That Amazon Ads Podcast.